Weeks passed, and Laila walked out of the hospital holding Steve's hand. "I know. I promise not to do that again," Laila says as she walks over to Steve's bike. "Good. I don't want you to hurt yourself like that ever again," Steve says and helps Laila on the bike. Laila holds on to Steve as he starts to drive. Speaking of, "How's Wanda and Pietro?" Laila asks. "They're doing great. Wanda wants to talk to you, but I told her to let you heal first," Steve says. "I'm glad that they're doing great," Laila says as she smiles. Steve smiles as well before focusing back onto the road, and after a while of driving, they manage to get back to Laila's apartment. "Will you be all right?" Steve asks as he looks at her, and Laila nods. "I will be back to check in on you, okay?" Steve says, and Laila does a little tease. "Can't make Star-Spangled mad, now do I?" As she does a little laugh but winces as it hurts her stomach where the blast is a bit. Steve looks at her, then at her lips, before looking back at her eyes again before getting up. "Maybe, if you like, we can do a movie night as a date?" Laila asks as she looks at him and Steve looks at her. "I like that idea. But what movies?" Steve asks. "I don't know. Maybe this company called DreamWorks or Disney or horror movies. I do want to watch them," Laila suggests, and Steve thinks for a moment before speaking up. "Horror movies it is, but if it gets too much for your pain, I'm going to turn it off," which makes Laila nods before replying with, "Of course. We need to get some popcorn, eat some horror movies. So, Target, here we come." Laila laughs to herself as she said that, and she looks at Steve as he speaks. "No, I'll go. I want you to rest." Steve grabs a pillow from the couch and places it on the edge of the couch to make it look like a bed. "You miss, lay down," Steve orders, and Laila goes lay down on the couch and she watches Steve leave the apartment to get some food and some horror movies. "He's lucky he's hot and I'm in pain still, or I would have kicked his ass," Laila mutters to herself as she looks at the ceiling, then at the TV and grabs the remote and flicks through the channel and finds a show to watch while she waits for him. After finishing a show she found to keep herself entertained, Laila hears the door open and shut, and she sees Steve walk in with 2 bags. "Didn't I say popcorn and horror movies?" Laila teases as Steve puts the bags down before replying. "Yeah, well, thought to get some more food for us to eat when we get bored of popcorn." Laila smiles before getting up slowly and looks over to him as he walks over to sit down next to her. "What movies did you get?" Laila asks, and Steve looks at her as he lists off the DVDs that he got for the movie date night. "Ooh, The Visit. That looks great," Laila says, and she watches Steve preparing the movie and food. While she's sitting it down and looking at him dreamily, Steve doesn't notice and he teases her half of the time by flexing his shoulders before ducking as Laila throws a pillow at him. "Teaser," Laila laughs after she throws the pillow. Steve laughs before getting up and walking over to the bags and taking out the food he bought. Popcorn, candies and some drinks, and he gave Laila the bag so she could grab what's in the bag, and she grabs out some M&Ms and some Reese's peanut butter cups. "My favourite," Laila says as she puts them to one side and watches Steve put in The Visit in the DVD player. As the movie plays, Laila shifts just a little, letting out a sigh as she snuggles into Steve's side. "You okay?" he asks quietly, not wanting to disturb the eerie tension of the movie, and Laila replies as her voice is gentle. "Better now? I feel safe with you." Steve smiles as he rests his chin lightly atop her head. "You are safe. You will always be." And Laila smiles at his words. They sat in silence for a few minutes. Just as the film flickered in the background, the jump scare made Laila grab his arm. "Are you sure that you're not scared, trouble magnet?" Steve teases as he looks at her. "Shut up," Laila mutters as she hits him softly on his chest with a smirk before finishing off her sentence. "Just using you as my emotional support, soldier." Steve laughs a bit at her words, and he looks at her again as Laila looks at him. Both of them feel their hearts skip at that point, and they slowly lean into each other and slowly start to kiss each other. After the kiss, they smile, and they see the movie end, and Laila yawns a bit. It's time to go to bed, Laila says to herself as she slowly gets up and looks at Steve, and he smiles before Laila asks him to stay tonight. Always, Steve replies. Steve gets up and helps her get into bed, fluffing the pillows and pulling the covers up, which causes Laila to tease him. You know you don't have to tuck me in like I'm a kid, right? I know I'm in pain, but still. Steve was about to leave, but Laila grabbed his arm and looked into his eyes. Sleep next to me, Laila begs softly after he turns back slowly, as his eyes meet hers. Steve's gaze softens, and he smiles softly before replying in his soft voice. Of course. And Laila smiles, and carefully moves to the next pillow. Steve walks back over to her and sits on the edge for a moment to remove his shoes, and he climbs beside her, careful, gentle, and respectful. But as he lies on his back, giving her space, he feels Laila cuddling up to him, her head on his chest. He wraps his arms around her protectively. I love you, Steve, Laila sleepily mutters, and Steve freezes for a second, not because he doesn't want to hear it, but because those 3 words hit him in ways that he couldn't explain. He looks down at her, nestled against him, eyes closed, her breathing already slowing into sleep. Her voice was barely a whisper, like it slipped out without permission, but that made it feel more real. A gentle smile tugs at his lips before kissing the top of her forehead, and whispers back, I love you too, Laila, more than you know. He doesn't know if she heard him, but he means it. After a while, Steve slowly starts to fall asleep, holding Laila in his arms. Next morning, Laila woke up and she notices Steve is not in bed with her. She sits up in bed to yawn and stretch her body before getting out of bed and into another set of everyday wear before heading to the bathroom. On her way to the bathroom, she could smell pancakes coming from the kitchen. Then she walks into the bathroom, does what she needs to do before washing her hands, brushing her teeth and hair. Then she heads to the kitchen to see Steve baking. Those pancakes smell lovely, Laila says as she sits down at the table and watches Steve, which causes Steve to chuckle. Well, you have a lot of things planned for today, sweetheart. I just thought you might need some fuel for it. And Laila smiles at that before saying, very captivating, aren't you? Which Steve glanced back with a smirk, clearly amused. You've been hanging around Stark's bad puns again, haven't you? And Laila shrugs her shoulders. That's for me to know and for you to find out, Laila says with a little tease in her tone. After cooking, Steve puts the pancakes on the plate, and he grabs some sherbet for Laila before giving it to her as he says, food first, your shenanigans later, which Laila smiles to and she starts to eat. While eating, however, her mind could not stop thinking about the life after everything is finished shit, if it would finish. Laila finishes her pancakes, and she cleans the dishes, and she kisses Steve before heading out. Okay, you can do this. Just tell him, Laila mutters as she walks over to the Avengers tower. After walking into the room, Laila notices Scarlett working on something. Hey, Scarlett, Laila says, and Scarlett looks over to her and smiles as she asks, Oh, hey Laila, what are you doing here? Laila thinks for a moment before replying, I was looking for Thor, do you know where he is? Scarlett nods and points to the balcony. Typical Thor, Laila says before walking over to the balcony. As she walks over, her mind raced with thoughts like, how do you even say this? Surprise, I'm your long-lost sister. Yes, because that is not traumatizing at all. But she stops before breathing in and out to calm her nerves, and she steps out of the balcony. Thor, Laila says to get his attention, and Thor looks over to her as he was looking out at the view. Laila, to what I own the pleasure. Thor replies, and Laila could feel her hand slowly pick at her nails nervously before she speaks. I needed to talk to you about something important, which Thor starts to look confused about. Is everything all right? Thor asks, and Laila breathes in and out before replying. I'm your little sister, the one that Loki stole away from you and Odin and Frigga. But I know you had trouble in the past with Hela and I had trouble with Hydra, and I didn't know what to say or do. Thor starts to think to process everything and realised why he felt that protective that day in 2012 when they were fighting Loki. All this time that I was fighting with the Avengers, and you, he murmured more to himself than to her. You were right beside me, and none of us knew. Laila nods before saying, yeah, I did not know then either, not until much later, thanks to Wanda and Zola. Thor looks over to her before walking closer and hug her. All this time, I thought I was fighting next to a random woman that took Steve's interest. And it turns out that she's my sister, the one I wanted, Thor muttered, and Laila does a little smile as she hugs back. We shall say no more lies to each other, Thor says as he pulls away, and Laila does a little laugh. Good, because I do not want to go another day hiding from the people I care about. Laila confessed. Then she hears Scarlet yell for her and she looks at Thor. I must go, and I promise to tell you my life after Loki took me away from Asgard, Laila says, and Thor nods before Laila walks back into the tower. What's going on? Laila says as she walks over to Scarlet and she sees Wanda and Pietro. I wanted to say thank you for saving my brother, Wanda says, and Laila's gaze shifts to Pietro, who gives a small nod of acknowledgement, but stays quiet, clearly still processing everything before looking back at Wanda. Wanda, you don't have to say thank you, Laila reassures her. But Wanda looks at her as she says firmly, yes, I do. I don't know what would have happened if you didn't. Laila looks at her before putting a hand on her shoulder. I just didn't want you to experience loss too quickly, which made Wanda smile at that. Well, I mean it. Thank you for saving my life, and I owe you one, Pietro says, and Laila smiles before teasingly saying, well, if I need help with getting some coffee, I'll be sure to call you, which made Pietro chuckle under his breath, and Wanda cracks a little smile. I hope you know we are here for you too, whatever you need. We are not just teammates anymore. We are family, Wanda says, and Laila smiles at that, then looks over to Scarlet as she says, all fuzzy feelings in the Stark Tower, who would have guessed? And Laila teases back with, haven't you got a date with the Greek god with glasses Missy? Which made Scarlet mutters to herself as she gets up and runs out of the room to get ready. Should I ask what that was, or? Wanda asked as she looks at Laila confused, and Laila does a little laugh to herself. Oh, I will tell you when the timing comes, Laila says, and Wanda narrowed her eyes in faux suspicion, but could not stop the amused smile tugging at her lips. Does that have to do with the boy, Scout with a cape, who saves cats from trees? Wanda asks as she clicks onto what just happened. Laila gasps dramatically, putting her hands on her chest as she says, Wanda! I would never reveal Clark Kent's secret identity like that. Which Wanda looks at her before doing a little laugh. You just did. Laila laughs as well before heading back home. After arriving home, Laila notices Steve is out. Then she notices a note from him which reads, I'll be back soon, Angel, which makes Laila smile at that. Always romantic. Women from the 40s should feel ashamed on passing on him. He might have been skinny, but damn, he has a huge heart, Laila says to herself as she puts down the note and she goes to get herself a drink of cola. Laila thought to herself as she drinks before hearing the door open. Did I miss the chance to sweep you off your feet again? Steve asks as he walks in and shuts the door behind him. Laila teases him. Maybe. Did you bring back some pancakes from a store and this incredibly hot guy with blonde hair? And Steve looks at her flustered while being confused. Well, I did bring back some pancakes. Quite sure they are warm, Steve says, but was about to say something else before it clicks on that she was talking about him. You had to tease me, didn't you? Steve asks as he puts down the bag that contains pancakes. And Laila says, Yes, I did. And don't worry, you're still my dork. Which causes Steve to chuckles. Always your dork, which made Laila smile at that. Good, or I'll have to fight someone for it. Laila teases, which again made Steve chuckle. Oh, you don't have to fight anyone for it. After speaking, Laila and Steve are now sat the couch eating pancakes and watching Laila's favourite show, Gilmore Girls. 5 months later, October 1st, Laila was at her apartment drinking her tea, and she checks the calendar and she sees it is Halloween time. Halloween time, huh? I wonder if Steve wants to be a part of it. Laila mutters to herself, and she grabs a pen and paper and writes down what she needs, like candy, chocolates, pumpkin for carving, Halloween decorations and all of that. Laila goes to her room to change into a comfortable outfit that is suited for October weather, and she puts on her boots and grabs her list for shopping and headed out of the door. Laila starts to head her way to store. After a while, Laila arrives at her favourite store, and she pushes the glass doors open and she walks inside. Okay, first thing first, candy for the children, Laila mutters to herself before grabbing her list to read what candy to get, and she starts to walk over to the candy aisle after grabbing a basket. Laila looks around at the sweets that was there, and she grabs the candy and puts them in the basket, and she looks for some snacks for both her and Steve. Laila grabs some M&Ms that she likes, and she thinks to herself as she looks for what Steve likes. Come on, do not tell me they are sold out. Laila says to herself, then she sighs of relief as she finds the candy that Steve likes, and she puts them in the basket before walking over to the decorations aisle. Okay, time for decorations, Laila says as she looks at her list to check what she needs before looking for decorations. At the decorations aisle, Laila grabs the decorations she needs. The stuff she got is fake cobwebs, plastic spiders, pumpkin-shaped springs lights. After grabbing what she needs from the decorations, she walks over to the costume aisle. Okay, I'll get 2 Spirite costume of mine, and Steve's interest and a couple costume, Laila says to herself, and she starts to look at the costume. Laila has gotten herself a red jacket, some black boots and pants, and some fake blood for fake wounds, some makeup that have not been used, and a fake gun. Meanwhile, for Steve's costume, she found some white wings which she grabbed, and she grabs a white shirt, some white pants and some white boots. Spirit costume's done. Now, for couple costume, Laila says before spotting a princess dress, and she thinks to herself and smiles before grabbing it and grabbing the prince costume. And she walks over to the cash register. The cashier looks over to Laila and notices the Halloween chaos in her basket, but she starts to grab the things and starts to scan them. Big party, or just want to make kids happy this Halloween? The woman says, and Laila looks at her and Laila nods. I want to make the kids happy this Halloween, Laila says as she smiles before she pays for the stuff, and she starts to leave to go home. As Laila is walking home, she notices parents and children talking about Halloween, and she smiles as missed the feeling of this time of year. After arriving home, Laila puts the bag down. Okay, time for Operation Spookily, the apartment is a go, Laila says, before she starts to put up decorations around the apartment. After decorating the apartment, Laila starts to put the candy away, but she left out a bag of M&Ms for herself, and she starts to eat them as she grabs her phone and messages Steve to come over. After a while, Steve walks over to Laila's apartment and he knocks on. Laila hears the knock. Then she walks over to the door and opens it. Hello, Steve, come on in, Laila says, and she moves out of Steve's way as he walks in. Thirsty? Laila asks as she walks over to her kitchen. Yeah, thanks, Steve says, and he sits down and he looks around the apartment and notices the Halloween decorations before looking over to Laila. Laila walks over and she passes him his drink after pouring it. "After this drink, I want to show you something," Laila says as she drinks her cola, and Steve looks at her before nodding, then drinks his cola. After drinking, Laila stands up and walks over to her bedroom, but she stops near the door and looks over to Steve. "First costume is from a game that I've recently played," Laila says before walking into her room, and she changes into her first costume. After changing into her costume, which is a character from the game called Left 4 Dead, Laila comes out and she looks over to Steve. "What do you think of this? As a Sperrit costume?" Laila says as she slowly spins around so Steve can see the whole outfit. "Whoa! You look absolutely beautiful," Steve says before asking, "Which character is this from the game?" Laila stops spinning and looks over to him. "Her name is Zoe. Her backstory is sad," Laila says, and she explains the backstory of Zoe, which Steve nods to before Laila goes back into the bedroom to change. Laila changes into a princess costume, and she walks out of the bedroom as she holds the skirt up a bit, so she would not fall. "As a couple costume," Laila says as she does a little spin again. Steve, for once, was speechless, but he slowly starts to smile. "You look gorgeous, and I really mean that," Steve manages to say. "So, we're going for a couple costume?" Laila asks and looks at him as Steve walks over to her. Yes, we are," Steve says as he pulls Laila closer to him by her waist and kisses her, which Laila kisses him back. Laila pulls back as she made a "oh" sound. Then she goes to grab Steve's costume and passes it over to him. "Well, since you said we're going to do couples costume, I thought it would be best for you to try out the Prince Charming costume," Laila says as she looks over to him, which Steve nods at and walks over to the bedroom to get changed. Laila sat down on her couch waiting. Then she hears the door open and she looks over to Steve, who came out in his prince costume. "Whoa, never mind Captain American. Halloween night. You're Captain Hottie," Laila says as she checks him out in his prince costume, which causes Steve to chuckle a bit. 4 weeks later, 31st, Laila woke up and she checks her phone to see the date before sitting up as she realises it is Halloween before she gets out of bed and goes to take a shower to refresh herself. "Okay, put the candy in separate bowls. One's full of stuff like gluten, milk and all that, and another for gluten-free, milk-free," Laila mutters in the shower before grabbing the towel and wraps it around her after getting out of the shower. Laila walks to her bedroom and she looks through her drawers for some comfortable clothes as she continues to mumble to herself. "Fuck, I did not label the candies," Laila says to herself as she holds her head, but she hopes that she remembers as she walks over to the kitchen. In the kitchen, Laila grabs 2 bowls and she grabs the candies she bought from the store at the beginning of the month, and she checks the labels on them and reads the ingredients before pouring 1 candies into 1 bowl that's full of the ingredients that some children might be allergic to, and she continues to do that until she has 2 bowls full of candies. After a while, Laila puts the bowls near the door after she puts label on them, saying, "Allergies free" and "contains allergies" on different bowls, and she checks the time, which is 10 o'clock a.m, on her clock before she goes back to the kitchen to eat some food. Laila makes herself some French toast shaped as a ghost, and after cooking, she walks over to the living room and she sits down as she grabs the remote and clicks through the different channel. After finding a music channel, Laila looks around her apartment and she finishes her French toast. After eating, Laila starts to clean up her apartment, of course leaving the decorations as her apartment is dirty. Laila hums along to Tina Turner's "What's Love Got to Do With It" as she does the dishes, the laundry, sweeping. After she checks the time and sees it's 12 p.m. "Okay, I'm doing good so far. Done the bowls, done the cleaning. What am I missing?" Laila says to herself before realising she forgot to carve out a pumpkin. After she put away the mop, Laila starts to do exactly that. Laila thinks to herself for a moment before cutting off the top of the pumpkin and clearing out the seeds before starting to cut a face into the pumpkin. After a while, Laila puts out the pumpkin near her doors and she sees Steve walking out of the elevator holding 2 cups of pumpkin spice latte. "Well, hello there, stranger," Laila says playfully as Steve walks over and Steve chuckles at that. "Stranger, huh? I guess I must have been busy," Steve says as he walks into Layla's apartment with Laila. "You have no idea, pretty boy," Laila says as she grabs her pumpkin spice latte from him, and she drinks a bit. Laila and Steve spoke to each other a while before Laila notices the time again, which is now 6 p.m, and she stands up before walking to the bedroom and changes into her princess costume. "Come on, it's time," Laila calls out to Steve before coming out, and she looks over to him. Steve puts down his cup before standing up, and he walks over to the bedroom to get changed as Laila hears the door knocking. As Steve finishes dressing up, Laila walks over to the door, and she opens it and is greeted by 2 children with their parents. Laila asks the parents if their kids have any allergies, which the parents said no to, and Laila gives them both candies from the Contain Allergies bowl. After giving out the candy to the children, Laila shuts the door, and she looks over to Steve, who just came out wearing the prince's costume, and Laila smiles. As the night goes on, Laila and Steve runs out of candy, and they both rest from the night before, changing into PJs, which Steve has brought his, and they went to bed after 12 a.m. hits.